Welcome, curious soul, to Tales of the Tattered Book. I am your host, the keeper of the book, guardian of an ancient tome whose pages write themselves with stories that should never be told. When darkness calls and the veil between worlds grows thin, this cursed volume reveals new horrors drawn from history's bloodiest secrets and realities that exist in the spaces between heartbeats. As I open these weathered pages tonight, remember, knowledge comes at a price, and some truths are too terrible for mortal minds to bear. Tonight, the Tattered Book opens to pages stained with pigment and blood, where art and agony dance together in unholy union. In the shadow-draped studios of Fin de Siècle Paris, we'll witness what happens when pain becomes the truest muse. Steel yourself, dear listener, for in Cassilda, we learn that some masterpieces demand a price written in flesh and madness. Let the story begins. Paris, October 1894. The rain hammered against the grimy windows of Le Chat Noir, each drop like a finger tapping against glass, demanding entry into the smoky den where broken dreams went to die. Henri Dubois sat hunched over his absinthe, the green fairy swirling in his glass like liquid regret. His painter's hands, once steady enough to capture the delicate curve of a nobleman's wife, now trembled as he counted the francs scattered before him. 12 francs from his last painting, and already half of it gone to the bottle.
Merde,
he whispered, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. 3 days since he'd eaten a proper meal. 2 weeks since he'd paid rent on his studio. And tomorrow, Monsieur Garnier would come for his money. Money Henri didn't have. The opium smoke that drifted from the back rooms made everything soft around the edges, but it couldn't blur the hard reality of his debts.
Henri, my good friend.
He looked up to see Marcel approaching, his round face flushed with drink and excitement. Behind him trailed 2 women, working girls from the look of them, but cleaned up enough for an evening's entertainment. Marcel slammed his palm on the table.
Fortune smiles. I've sold another piece to that American collector. Come, celebrate with us.
The 2 women smiled at Henri with practiced warmth. The first was a petite brunette with knowing eyes and rouge that couldn't quite hide the hardness around her mouth. But it was the second who caught his attention. Tall and pale, with auburn hair that shined in the gaslight like a copper flame. Her face held an aristocratic beauty, marred only by a small scar above her left eyebrow.
These are Margot,
Marcel said, gesturing to the brunette.
and Cassilda.
The auburn-haired woman inclined her head gracefully.
Enchantée,
Cassilda said, her voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent Henri couldn't place. Marcel ordered more absinthe, and Henri found himself drawn into conversation with Cassilda. She spoke of art with surprising knowledge, discussing Courbet and Manet with genuine understanding. When Henri mentioned his own work, her green eyes sharpened with interest.
do you paint what you see,
She said,
or what you wish to see?
I can only paint what I can see,
Henri replied, surprised by his own honesty.
even when it destroys me.
Something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. The evening dissolved into a haze of green liquor and laughter. Marcel's mood was infectious, his latest sale having lifted the perpetual weight of poverty from his shoulders, at least temporarily. They made their way to a shabby room above a bakery, thanks to Marcel who had procured the room for the evening. Henri saw his friend grinning at him as he tossed a couple of coins to the proprietor.
To friendship and art,
Marcel declared, raising his bottle of wine. Margot giggled and curled against his side while Cassilda moved with feline grace toward Henri. her dress slipping away to reveal a marble-pale skin that gleamed in the dim candlelight. Henri reached for her, his mind reeling in a haze of absinthe and desire, when the door exploded inward. 3 men in dark coats filled the doorway, their faces hidden beneath the brims of their hats. The largest stepped forward, brass knuckles gleaming on his right hand.
Monsieur Dubois, Monsieur Garnier sends his regards.
Henri crawled backward, while Marcel scrambled to his feet, spilling wine across the floor.
Wait, I can pay. I just need...
The brass knuckles caught him across the jaw, spinning him into the wall. Stars exploded across his vision as rough hands hauled him upright, just in time to see the other 2 men seize Marcel. He was crying like a child, pleading for his life.
Marcel helped you, didn't he? He bought your paintings when no one else would. He made you think you could keep running. Well, Monsieur Dubois, this ends now.
One assailant twisted Marcel to face Henri, forcing their eyes to meet. The other raised a knife. Its blade caught the light with a cruel gleam before slicing across Marcel's throat in a single, practiced stroke. Henri's friend, his only real friend, collapsed with a gurgling sound that would haunt Henri's dreams forever. Margot screamed his name, lunging toward her fallen companion, but the man who just killed Marcel struck her with a vicious backhand, slamming her against the wall. She collapsed, motionless, a thin ribbon of blood trickling from her temple. Cassilda, seeing her friend on the ground, cried her name. She tried to reach her, but the leader seized her by the hair, jerking her head back.
And for you, ma chérie,
he murmured, unsheathing a hidden blade.
A reminder that beauty is always fragile.
The blade traced a jagged line across Cassilda's left cheek, from temple to jaw, opening her face like a bloody flower. Her scream pierced the night, high and pure and filled with an agony that seemed to reach into Henri's very soul. And in that moment of perfect, crystalline pain, watching Marcel's lifeblood pool on the floor while Cassilda's scream echoed through his bones, Henri saw it. A vision burst behind his eyes like a revelation from some dark god. Canvas stretched taut, alive with colors that had no names. Figures writhing in ecstasy and torment, their faces shifting between human and something else entirely. At the center, a pale woman in a white mask, her beauty terrible and absolute. The vision lasted only seconds, but it burned itself into his mind with the permanence of acid on copper. Henri blinked, gasping, torn between the impossible image scorched onto his soul and the brutal reality closing in around him. The smell of blood, the sound of Cassilda's ragged cry, it all rushed back at once. Then the brass knuckles found Henri's painting hand next. The impact shattered 2 fingers and sent white-hot agony shooting up his arm. He collapsed to his knees, cradling his mangled hand against his chest. But even through his own pain, he couldn't look away from Cassilda. She lay crumpled against the wall, blood streaming from the wound that had transformed half her face into a crimson mask. But her eyes, those beautiful green eyes, still burned with defiant life.
Remember this feeling, artiste.
The leader growled, kicking Henri in the ribs.
Next time, Monsieur Garnier won't be so generous.
The 3 men filed out as suddenly as they'd arrived, leaving only the stink of sweat, wine and blood clinging to the air. Henri crawled toward Cassilda on his knees, his broken hand leaving smears of blood on the rough wooden floor.
Mon Dieu,
he whispered, reaching out with his good hand to touch her face. She flinched, then steadied, allowing his fingers to trace the air above her wound without making contact. Margot stirred in the corner, groaning softly as consciousness returned. She looked around the room with growing horror, her gaze settling on Marcel's body. Her lips shaped his name, Marcel, but no sound came. The breath caught in her throat, her mouth trembling as if the word itself were too fragile to survive. Then the silence broke, not with speech but with sobs, deep, racking sounds that filled the small room with grief. Henri glanced toward his dead friend, then back at Cassilda.
He is dead.
He said it softly, almost tenderly. Cassilda closed her eyes, tears streaking down to mingle with the blood. Her fingers rose shakily, hovering over the ruin of her cheek. Henri saw it all through the haze of his own agony. He looked at his shattered hand, twisted and broken, then at Cassilda, her defiance flickering behind the crimson mask that had once been her face. The vision still pulsed behind his eyes, that impossible canvas of ecstasy and torment, of faces wavering between mortal and divine.
Come,
He said, struggling to his feet.
I'll take you to a doctor.
With what money?
She laughed bitterly, then winced as the movement pulled at her wound.
Look at me, Henri. What doctor would waste his time on a whore's face?
The words hit him like another blow, but not because they were cruel, because they were true. In the harsh arithmetic of Parisian streets, a scarred prostitute was damaged goods, not worth the time or effort of any decent doctors.
Then come home with me,
He said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice.
I can clean the wound, at least. And we both need time to heal.
Cassilda studied his face in the flickering light.
Why?
She asked simply. Something passed between them, an understanding born out of misery, of being broken in the same moment by the same hands. Henri looked again at his mangled painting hand, then at the vision that still burned in his mind's eye, and finally at her.
Because I think we need each other now.
They left Margot to mourn Marcel and made their way through the pre-dawn streets like two wounded animals, supporting each other's weight. Henri's studio occupied the top floor of a narrow building in Montmartre, reached by a staircase so steep it might have been designed by a sadist. By the time they climbed to the fourth floor, both were gasping with exhaustion and pain. The studio itself was a testament to Henri's declining fortunes. A single room with a slanted ceiling, furnished with little more than an easel, a narrow bed, and canvases stacked against the walls like accusations. The pale morning light that filtered through the grimy skylight revealed the full extent of their injuries. Cassilda's wound was worse than Henri had thought. The knife had cut deep, laying open the flesh from her temple to the corner of her mouth. The bleeding had mostly stopped, but the edges of the cut gaped like a second smile.
Merde,
He breathed, fetching clean water and the last of his good linen.
That bad?
Cassilda asked, catching sight of herself in the cracked mirror beside his easel. She stared at her reflection for a long moment, then laughed, a sound devoid of humor.
Well, there's an end to that career.
Henri cleaned the wound as gently as he could with his good hand, his broken fingers throbbing in time with his heartbeat. As he worked, he found himself studying the way the cut changed the architecture of her face, how it created new shadows and angles.
You're looking at me strangely.
Cassilda observed.
I'm sorry,
Don't be. I did not mean that.
She caught his wrist with surprising gentleness.
You are not looking at me with pity, but something else. What do you see?
The vision flickered again behind his eyes. That impossible painting where beauty and horror danced together in perfect, terrible harmony.
I see.
He began, then stopped. How could he explain that her ruined face somehow made the vision clearer? That in her wound, he glimpsed the possibility of creating something beyond mere representation.
I see a different kind of beauty.
He said finally.
One that hurts to look at.
Cassilda's good eye widened slightly.
And you want to paint it?
It wasn't a question.
Yes.
Henri admitted.
God help me, yes.
Then paint me.
1 week later. Henri's studio had become a sanctuary of sorts, though whether for healing or corruption remained unclear. The autumn light that filtered through the skylight cast everything in shades of amber and rust, turning even the mundane, his scattered brushes, the empty wine bottles, the blood-stained rags, into something that might have stepped out from a Caravaggio canvas. Cassilda moved through the space with feline grace, her wound healing into a thick, raised line that pulled at the corner of her mouth. She wore one of Henri's old shirts, the white linen falling to her thighs, and nothing else. The casualness of her near nudity should have been arousing, but Henri found himself more fascinated by the way the scar changed the architecture of her face.
You slept badly.
She observed, setting down coffee beside his easel. Henri nodded, flexing his splintered fingers. The broken bones ached constantly, but the pain had become useful.
I keep seeing it. The vision from when they hurt you.
And what do you see exactly?
Cassilda settled onto the worn velvet chair that served as his model's seat, tucking one leg beneath her. The movement was unconsciously sensual, but her green eyes remained focused on his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable.
A canvas,
Henri said slowly, his left hand, still clumsy with the brush, pausing over his palette.
I see the moment when they cut you, but the roles are reversed. They are the ones suffering now. Their faces are ecstatic even as they die, as if their own pain gave them revelation.
Like me.
Cassilda said softly, tracing her scar.
When the knife cut me, for just a moment before the pain, there was something else. Something that felt like l'ecstasy.
Henri froze. Cassilda's lips curved in a strange, almost wistful smile.
Comme un navire qui prend le large, percé par la houle, je goûterai l'extase infinie.
Her voice was low, melodic, as if the memory itself carried her away. Henri's gaze locked on her, half her face ruined, half still radiant, and yet, perhaps because of the scar, she seemed to embody that terrible beauty he had glimpsed in his vision.
Look at us, Henri. I pose for you with half my face destroyed because somehow that makes me more beautiful to you than I ever was intact. Nothing about us is normal anymore.
She was right, of course. Henri had tried to paint her as she'd been before, unmarked, conventionally beautiful. But the attempts felt lifeless, academic. It was only when he painted the scar, the way it twisted her smile into something knowing and cruel, that the canvas came alive beneath his brush.
Only when you painted the wound, Henri. Only then did I feel alive in your eyes. Beauty was a mask. Pain stripped it away. Do you understand? Pain is what makes me real.
She reached for the silk scarf draped over his easel, winding it slowly around her throat. She reached for the silk scarf draped over his easel, winding it slowly around her throat. The white silk contrasted starkly against her pale skin and the angry red line of her scar.
Show me what you saw.
Cassilda, I don't think...
Are you afraid?
Henri met her gaze. The vision pulsed behind his eyes. Colors without names, shifting faces, the pale woman in the white mask. He swallowed.
No,
he lied. Her fingers tightened on the scarf. She drew it taut, then extended the other end toward him.
Then use me,
she whispered, kneeling behind the large canvas he'd prepared.
Just enough to make you see.
I can't hurt you.
You won't,
she said, extending the other end of the scarf toward him.
You'll complete me. Take it. Use your broken hand, mon coeur. We'll suffer together.
Henri's broken fingers closed around the silk, sending spikes of agony up his arm. Cassilda disappeared behind the canvas, visible only as a shadow, her breathing the only sound in the studio.
Now, show me what you saw.
Henri began to pull gently, feeling the silk grow taut. Cassilda's breathing changed immediately, becoming forced, labored, but somehow expectant.
Encore,
she gasped. More. As Henri tightened his grip, his broken fingers screaming in protest, the vision began to build behind his eyes. The canvas was larger than anything he'd attempted before. stretched across a frame he'd built from scavenged wood. Under the flickering gaslight, he painted with a fury he'd never known he possessed. His left hand moved as if guided by some external force, laying down colors that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Cassilda gasped, her voice strained but urgent. She began to whisper, her voice barely audible but hypnotic.
Along the shores where shadows break, the dying suns sink in the lake.
Henri's brush faltered.
What did you say?
Just something I heard once. In a dream, perhaps.
Her voice was getting weaker but more ethereal.
Do you know what I think about while you paint me? I think about home. A place I've never seen but always known. Tight. Harder.
She ordered him. Henri tightened his grip once more, his broken fingers sending white-hot agony through his arm. And suddenly the vision exploded into perfect clarity. The painting showed 3 men in a narrow room, but they were no longer quite human. Their faces had begun to melt, features sliding into new configurations. The largest figure, unmistakably the leader who had killed Marcel, knelt in a pool of his own blood, his hands pressed to his throat in a futile attempt to stop the crimson flood pouring between his fingers. But at the center of it all, between the dying men, stood Cassilda herself, not as victim, but as something terrible and beautiful, her scarred face radiant with the same ecstasy that marked the faces of the dying men. Her arms spread wide as if conducting an orchestra of agony.
Oui.
Came her strangled whisper from behind the canvas.
Just like that.
But it was the expression on all their faces that made the painting transcendent. Not fear or pain, but rapture. As if the act of dying, or being reborn through violence, had shown them something beautiful beyond comprehension. By dawn, the painting was finished. Henri stepped back, his shirt soaked with sweat, his left hand stained crimson to the wrist. The silk fell from his nerveless fingers as Cassilda emerged from behind the canvas, her throat marked with red lines, her green eyes bright with shared triumph. The canvas seemed to pulse in the morning light, the painted blood still wet enough to catch the sun.
C'est parfait.
Cassilda breathed, her voice hoarse but exultant.
It's exactly what you saw. What we saw.
Henri nodded, unable to speak. The painting was indeed perfect. Too perfect. Every detail of the room, every fold of the men's clothing, every drop of blood was rendered with uncanny precision. But that wasn't what made his stomach churn with equal parts pride and terror. It was the way the painted figures seemed to move almost imperceptibly when he stared directly at them. And the way Cassilda's painted double seemed to smile back at them both. 5 days later, the newspaper lay folded on Henri's table, its headline stark in the morning light. 3 hommes found dead, circumstances unknown. Henri's hands shook as he read the details. The bodies had been discovered in a warehouse near the docks. Garnier's men, all 3 of them.
Mon Dieu.
Henri whispered. Cassilda emerged from behind the canvas, her movements fluid and predatory.
You read about our friends?
Cassilda, these men, the painting.
Was beautiful work.
She finished.
Your finest yet.
She picked up the newspaper with the same expression she might have worn while examining a still life.
Though I think you could have been more creative.
Henri felt something cold crawl up his spine.
You're not surprised.
Why should I be surprised by justice?
Cassilda moved to a wooden box in the corner, retrieving something that made Henri's breath catch. A length of rope, but woven with thin metal barbs. A silicio. The penitent's cord.
They took something from us, mon cœur.
She wound it around her wrist, the barbs biting into her pale skin. Tiny drops of blood welling up like rubies.
What are you doing?
It's time to create something new, mon cœur.
She said, her green eyes bright with anticipation.
Beauty is fleeting, Henri, but suffering is eternal.
Henri felt that familiar surge of vision building behind his eyes.
More?
He asked, though his left hand was already reaching for the brush. Cassilda smiled. 2 weeks later, the first buyer fled after looking at the painting for less than 30 seconds. Dégoûtant, he muttered, practically running from the studio. Disgusting. The second buyer lasted longer, nearly 5 minutes before the color drained from his face, and he made hasty excuses about needing to consider the purchase.
Perhaps we should try a different gallery,
Henri suggested.
No,
Cassilda said firmly.
the work is perfect. It's their minds that are too small.
She rose from the bed, unbothered by her nudity, and moved to examine the painting. Her skin was marked with the remnants of their latest session. Fresh rope burns circled both her wrists and ankles like bracelets, and a thin line of dried blood traced along her collarbone, where Henri's palette knife had slipped during their last collaboration.
Tu vois?
Cassilda tilted her head toward the canvas.
Her eyes follow you, n'est-ce pas?
Henri swallowed. The painting seemed to breathe, as alive as their first had been.
This isn't art anymore.
Non, mon cœur.
Cassilda moved behind him, scarred hands tracing his shoulders.
It's so much more. It's the purest form of art, eternal beauty and truth. Not for the world, Henri. Not for the critics, nor the galleries. They will never understand.
Her fingers brushed his broken hand, guiding it back toward the canvas.
It's for us. It's the price we pay for art that truly lives.
Despite everything, Henri relaxed under her touch. Their relationship had evolved beyond conventional definitions. Part love affair, part artistic collaboration, part descent into mutual madness.
What are we doing here, Cassilda?
Cassilda reached for the silicio, the barbed rope that had become their sacred instrument.
Nous créons
She whispered. We create,
pour l'art.
she added, winding the barbs around her wrist.
For the art.
November 1894. The antiquarian's shop was tucked between a bakery and a bookbinder's, like a secret whispered between conversations. Théâtre antique et curiosité, read the faded gilt lettering. Inside, theatrical props lined the shelves. Masks, headdresses, costumes from long-closed opera houses. The proprietor, thin with wire spectacles, looked up with mild interest.
Bonjour, monsieur. Something particular you seek?
Henri moved through the cramped aisles. He'd seen something in a vision. Something white and terrible. Necessary. A mask. The proprietor's eyes sharpened.
Ah, oui. I have pieces from the old Théâtre du Grand Guignol, and some from private collections.
He gestured toward a cabinet.
But perhaps monsieur has something specific in mind.
Henri peered through the dusty glass. Inside lay an assortment of masks, but in the center, wrapped in black silk, lay something that made his breath catch.
That one.
He pointed.
The white one.
That one has quite a history.
He lifted the mask carefully.
It belonged to a theater company that performed Le Roi en Jaune. Do you know the play?
Henri shook his head. The name was familiar, but he couldn't place where he'd heard it.
The company disbanded after unpleasant circumstances. The lead actress playing Cassilda was found wearing this mask. When they tried to remove it,
He shrugged.
it had to be persuaded to let go. Or at least this is how the story goes.
Henri's hands stilled on the glass case. Cassilda. The same name as his. He turned slowly, as if the proprietor's words had awakened something sleeping in his mind. His Cassilda, with her scarred face and green eyes that held too much knowledge. The coincidence felt less like chance and more like destiny arranging itself.
What a strange coincidence.
He murmured, more to himself than to the shopkeeper. But even as the words left his lips, Henri knew it wasn't coincidence at all. the vision that had haunted him, the way she'd appeared in his life at the exact moment of his greatest desperation, the way pain had transformed her into something more beautiful than mere flesh. It was all connected. The threads of fate pulling him toward this moment, this mask, this terrible and wonderful revelation. And the mask, mask was perfect. Pure white porcelain, smooth as marble, with only 2 almond-shaped holes for eyes. No mouth, no features, just a terrible, beautiful blankness. Henri paid without haggling, wrapping the mask in his coat. On the street, Paris hummed around him, but he felt detached, viewing the city through glass. Back at the studio, Cassilda sat naked at his easel, painting. She'd taken to creating during his absences, strange works that seemed to mirror the beautiful darkness he saw in her every day.
You found something.
She said without turning. Henri unwrapped the mask, setting it on the table.
It's parfait.
The shopkeeper said it belonged to an actress.
Henri told her.
Someone who played Cassilda in Le Roi en Jaune.
What a coincidence.
Cassilda murmured, moving toward the mask.
Puis-je? May I?
Henri nodded, lifting the mask and placing it gently in her hands. The porcelain settled over her features like a second skin, covering the scar that had become so familiar. Suddenly she was no longer Cassilda, the scarred prostitute, but someone else entirely. Regal, magnetic, and utterly desired.
How do I look?
She asked, and her voice seemed to come from very far away. To Henri's eyes, she was perfect, or even more, transcendent, made of a beauty not from unmarked flesh, but something far more dangerous. A fallen angel who had chosen her damnation willingly and found ecstasy in the fall.
Magnifique,
he whispered, his voice thick with reverence. Cassilda tilted her masked head, studying him through those empty eye holes. Something shifted in the air between them, an unspoken understanding that tonight would be different. Tonight, they would create something that would change everything.
Then paint me, like you never painted me before.
Without breaking eye contact, she began to undress him with deliberate precision. Their rituals had evolved far beyond mere pleasure. This was a fusion of pain, creation, and desire that left them both transformed with each encounter. Henri moved as if in a trance, pushing furniture to the edges of the studio. The worn wooden planks stretched before them like a waiting canvas, floors that had absorbed years of paint and blood, sweat and tears. Tonight they would drink deeper.
Today,
she murmured.
We birth our eternal masterpiece.
Cassilda moved to the center of the cleared space, the white mask catching the lamplight like a second moon. Every palette, every brush, every instrument of creation surrounded her like offerings at an altar where beauty and horror would be wed in pigment and passion. Henri lifted his brush, and the vision blazed behind his eyes. As he began to paint, Cassilda's voice rose in otherworldly recitation, filling not just the studio, but seemingly the entire building.
Along the shores where shadows break, the dying suns sink in the lake, and darkness falls on lost Carcosa. Strange are the nights when pale stars rise, and twin moons dance through empty skies. But stranger still is mad Carcosa.
With each verse, the painting grew more vivid, more alive. Henri found himself painting, not just Cassilda, but an entire world. A city of black spires that bent like dancers in ecstasy, where robed figures moved beneath black stars that burned with their own dark radiance.
Songs that the wind shall always sing, where hang the tatters of the king, must echo through dim Carcosa.
The paint seemed to flow with its own purpose, colors bleeding and shifting like wine across silk. Spires of crystallized shadow rose from the painted cityscape, each one pulsing with decadent life as they stretched toward realms that existed only in the fever dreams of artists.
Voice of my soul, my song is dead. Die here, unheard, like tears unshed that fall like rain in lost Carcosa.
And finally, Henri painted a crown, a circlet of black stars that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his own heartbeat, adorning his beloved Queen of Shadows. As the final verse echoed through the studio, Henri stepped back from the completed painting. What he had created was no longer mere art. It was a doorway into a realm where desire and darkness danced as one.
Bienvenue à Carcosa,
said the painted queen. Henri looked up to see two Cassildas, the real woman transformed by the mask into something divine and terrible, and her painted double, identical in every detail. Both wore the same white mask. Both sat upon thrones of crystallized starlight. Both spoke with voices that carried the weight of eternity. And both smiled, though the porcelain masks showed no expression. The smile lived in their posture, in the tilt of their heads, in the way the very air around them shimmered with shared triumph. Paris, December 23rd, 1894. The Hôtel des Ambassadeurs had seen better days, but its faded grandeur still attracted a certain class of Parisian society. Artists, writers, the kind of wealthy bohemians who collected scandalous experiences like others collected paintings. Tonight, the hotel's grand ballroom thrummed with conversation and laughter, champagne glasses catching the light of 100 gas lamps. In the dimly lit alcoves, figures in elaborate costumes surrendered to every variety of carnal excess, their gasps and whispers forming a symphony of transgression. Henri and Cassilda moved through the crowd like visiting royalty. She wore a black evening gown that complemented her white mask perfectly. Conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned to follow her passage, drawn by something they couldn't name, before resuming with nervous laughter. The other guests assumed it was merely an affectation, artistic pretension of the sort that was fashionable among the avant-garde. If only they knew. The evening progressed through its predictable stages of scandal and indulgence, bodies moving in shadows, masks hiding identities that were shed as easily as silk gowns. But as midnight approached, the guests found themselves drawn, naked, disheveled, satiated, into the main hall, where a massive curtain covered one entire wall.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Henri announced, his voice carrying an authority that made the assembled crowd fall silent.
I present to you the kingdom of Carcosa, where all true artists must eventually reign.
The curtain fell away with theatrical precision, revealing the masterpiece that dominated the entire wall. Henri's painting, expanded to magnificent proportions, showed the city of Carcosa in all its terrible glory. The details were so precise, so alive, that guests found themselves unable to look away. And in the center of it all stood a woman in a white mask and tattered yellow gown, a circlet of black stars crowning her head, her arms spread wide in welcome. The crowd moved closer, walking slowly across the marble floor as they gazed up at the enormous canvas. Henri watched their faces change as they stared at the painting, initial confusion giving way to fascination, then to a kind of terrible understanding. Each guest saw themselves reflected in the painted city, some strangled by their own shadows, others falling from spires in ecstatic surrender, a few being devoured by creatures that wore their faces like benedictions.
Mon Dieu,
whispered a woman in pearls, reaching toward the massive canvas.
Ne touchez pas.
Don't touch, Cassilda warned, her masked face turning toward the woman.
Pas encore.
Not yet. One by one, the guests continued their slow procession beneath the towering artwork, and in the painted reflections they saw their own deaths and transformations. Scenes of exquisite destruction, each face radiant with perfect rapture.
C'est magnifique.
Cassilda breathed, her masked face surveying the transformed guests, with the satisfaction of a goddess reviewing her new domain. Paris's elite moved like sleepwalkers through her painted paradise, each one becoming a willing citizen of the realm she had conjured through Henri's hands. She turned to Henri, her porcelain fingers finding his with proprietary grace, not seeking comfort, but claiming what was hers.
C'est seulement le commencement.
It's only the beginning, she declared. The mansion stood empty the next morning, its ballroom silent and dust-covered, as if no party had been held there for decades. The only evidence of the night's events was a single newspaper clipping. Mystérieuse disparition de l'élite parisienne. 112 of Paris's most prominent citizens vanish without trace during exclusive art exhibition. Police investigation yields no leads, and in the margins, written in exquisite calligraphy that seemed to dance even as one looked at it, were 4 words.
La reine s'est levée.
The Queen has risen.
And so, dear listeners, we close these pages stained with pigment and tears. But remember, art born from true suffering never truly rests in its frame. When next you feel drawn to a painting that shouldn't exist, that makes your heart race with recognition you cannot name, step closer. After all, the finest masterpieces are always searching for their next patron. If you dare to delve deeper into these eldritch mysteries, subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review, and whisper of our tales to others. Your engagement feeds the book, fueling the terrors yet to come. Until next time, and may your nights be sleepless and your dreams unsettling.